Grok 4. This is the latest artificial intelligence system, and let me be very, very clear. This is a moment where promise and peril are going to collide.
What if the Book of Enoch isn't simply an ancient legend, but something much more important than we've always been taught to believe? For centuries, this text has remained at the heart of controversy, packed with mysterious visions, heavenly beings, and stories that never became part of the mainstream religious canon. Now, with the support of Grok AI, researchers are exploring its language patterns and hidden meanings in ways that just weren't possible before. But instead of providing clear answers, the discoveries are revealing connections and interpretations that are causing people to completely reconsider what this ancient document could truly be saying. If you're new here, hit subscribe and stick around. We explore ancient texts, forgotten history, and the questions most channels are simply too afraid to ask. What is the Book of Enoch, and why was it kept hidden?
Enoch is a very minor character in the Bible. The mysterious thing about him is it says Enoch walked with God and he was no more because God took him.
The Book of Enoch, also called First Enoch, is an ancient Jewish religious text credited to Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah. It's believed to have been written sometime between 300 BCE and 100 BCE, although many scholars believe parts of it are even older. It follows Enoch's journey across the heavens, his encounters with angels and fallen beings, and vivid visions of judgment, the universe, and the end of time. For most of Western Christianity, this book practically doesn't exist. It was excluded from the official canon during the early church councils and for more than 1,000 years. The complete version virtually disappeared from the Western world. The only Christian tradition that preserved it as official scripture was the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which safeguarded it in the ancient Ge'ez language. That's exactly how the first complete version found its way back to the West when Scottish explorer James Bruce returned with copies from Ethiopia in 1773. Here's what makes it so important.
It's worth repeating that Grok 4 is PhD level in everything.
The Book of Enoch is clearly referenced in the biblical Book of Jude, and many scholars believe it influenced the theology of the New Testament writers. Jesus and his disciples almost certainly knew this text was available. So, the biggest question has always been, why was it removed? Was it too controversial? Too specific? Did it include ideas that certain authorities simply didn't want ordinary people reading openly? That mystery is exactly what inspired people to analyze it using AI in the first place. They wanted to examine it without the influence of centuries of religious politics, and Grok gave them the opportunity to do exactly that. What is Grok AI, and why use it for this? It's worth saying again. Grok 4 is PhD level in everything. Grok is an AI created by xAI, Elon Musk's artificial intelligence company. It launched in late 2023 and has been presented as an AI that responds with greater directness and a stronger willingness to explore unconventional topics than many of its competitors. It relies on an enormous training dataset and can perform advanced textual analysis, recognize themes, compare literary structures, and explain complex ideas clearly. Now, AI examining ancient religious texts isn't completely new. Researchers have been using computational tools on the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Torah, and the New Testament for many years. But what's different about putting the Book of Enoch through a conversational AI like Grok is how accessible it has become. Everyday people, not only university scholars, can ask detailed questions and receive organized, easy-to-understand answers. You can ask it to compare chapters, recognize recurring symbols, or explain theological meanings in simple language. What researchers and enthusiasts found while doing this was that Grok didn't simply summarize the Book of Enoch. It recognized structural patterns, thematic groupings, and theological tensions throughout the text that had previously only appeared in academic papers most people never encountered. It also revealed connections between the Book of Enoch and other ancient writings, from Mesopotamian mythology to the Dead Sea Scrolls, making the analysis genuinely fascinating. The main thing to understand here is that Grok isn't making supernatural claims. It's doing what large language models are designed to do, recognizing patterns in language, connecting related ideas, and presenting them clearly. But when the source material is something as rich and ancient as 1st Enoch, those patterns become especially fascinating. The Watchers, the section that AI highlighted immediately. One of the first things Grok emphasized while examining the Book of Enoch was the portion called the Book of the Watchers, covering chapters 1 through 36. This section describes a group of heavenly beings known as the Watchers, angels assigned to observe humanity who chose to descend to earth, marry human women, and father hybrid children called the Nephilim. This isn't a minor story. It's the complete foundation of the book's opening section. And what Grok highlighted is that this narrative directly connects with, and in many ways expands upon, several mysterious verses in Genesis 6:1-4, where the sons of God marry the daughters of men and produce giants. The Book of Enoch identifies these watchers by name, recognizes their leader as Semyaza, and explains in detail the knowledge they shared with humanity, including metalworking, cosmetics, sorcery, and the mysteries of astrology. Grok also pointed out something scholars have discussed for decades. The Watchers' narrative shares strong structural similarities with ancient Mesopotamian writings, especially stories about the Apkallu, semi-divine beings in Sumerian and Babylonian mythology, believed to have descended from the heavens and taught humanity the foundations of civilization. The similarity is close enough that some researchers believe both traditions may have originated from an even older common source. The reason this matters for the AI analysis specifically is that Grok was able to trace these connections across multiple texts at the same time, something a single human researcher studying one book after another simply can't accomplish as efficiently. It presented the similarities clearly and without bias, making these cultural relationships much easier for everyday readers to recognize. The Nephilim connection, and what AI concluded from it. The Nephilim, the children of the Watchers and human women, are described in the Book of Enoch as giants who consumed everything humanity created, then turned against humans themselves, and eventually turned against one another. When they died, their spirits were believed to become evil spirits upon the earth, which the text describes as the very beginning of demonic activity in the world. This is a major theological claim, and Grok examined how it aligns, or doesn't align, with mainstream Christian and Jewish theology. What it found is that this narrative offers an explanatory framework that the canonical Bible leaves unfinished. The Bible mentions the Nephilim, but never explains what became of them or where evil spirits originated. The Book of Enoch fills those missing pieces with a very detailed explanation. Grok also highlighted that the Nephilim concept appears throughout other ancient cultures under different names. The Greek Titans, Sumerian demigods, and even certain interpretations of fallen heroes in ancient Egyptian writings have all been compared to the Nephilim by researchers. To be clear, AI is not proving these beings actually existed. What it's doing is recognizing that the narrative pattern of powerful hybrid beings who corrupt the world appears across nearly every ancient culture, which is a truly fascinating anthropological observation from both a storytelling and religious studies perspective. Grok's analysis made one thing absolutely clear. The Book of Enoch was not a forgotten fringe text. It was a detailed, internally consistent cosmological narrative that explored questions about the origin of evil, the structure of the spiritual world, and the destiny of humanity with far greater detail than the Bible's canonical books, the fallen angels, a record that was almost forgotten. One of the most remarkable things Grok uncovered from the Book of Enoch is that it actually identifies the fallen angels, not only their leader, Semyaza, but an entire list of 200 watchers who descended upon Mount Hermon. Names such as Azazel, Armaros, Barakijal, Kokabel, and Zekel appear throughout the text, each assigned distinct responsibilities. Azazel especially receives considerable attention. According to the Book of Enoch, he taught humanity how to create swords, shields, and breastplates, essentially introducing the technology of warfare. He also taught women the practice of beautification through metals and jewelry, which the text describes as a form of corruption. God's judgment within the text falls especially heavily on Azazel, who is bound and cast into darkness to await the final judgment. What Grok highlighted here was a direct textual connection to Leviticus 16 in the Bible, where the scapegoat ritual takes place. One goat is sacrificed to God, and the other is sent into the wilderness for Azazel, a reference that many Bible readers have never received a clear explanation for. The Book of Enoch provides that missing context, and Grok made the connection unmistakably clear through its analysis. This is exactly the kind of cross-referencing that makes AI analysis of ancient texts genuinely valuable. Without Grok, discovering that connection requires studying multiple books, several translations, and a considerable amount of academic research. The AI condensed all of that information and presented it in a way that everyday readers could easily understand and investigate further. The astronomical sections. Ancient precision that amazed everyone. Chapters 72 through 82 of the Book of Enoch are known as the Book of the Luminaries, or the Astronomical Book. This section is actually one of the oldest parts of the entire text, with fragments discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls dating back to around 200 BCC. It focuses on the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, and it does so with remarkable detail for its time. Grok's analysis highlighted that this section describes a 364-day solar calendar, a system organized into 4 seasons of 91 days each. This differs from the lunar calendar used in most Jewish religious practice, and it closely matches the calendar system found in other Dead Sea Scrolls writings, including the community calendar followed by the Essenes. This similarity has led some scholars to suggest that the group responsible for preserving the Dead Sea Scrolls had a direct connection to the tradition that produced the Book of Enoch. The AI also observed that although the astronomical descriptions in this section aren't scientifically accurate by modern standards, they reflect a sophisticated observational system that would have required careful, long-term study of the night sky. The description of the sun's gates, 6 on the eastern horizon and 6 on the western, corresponds to a genuine observational phenomenon. The sun truly rises and sets at noticeably different positions along the horizon throughout the year, and tracking those locations was essential to ancient calendar systems. What makes this section especially compelling is that it's not simply mythology. It's a systematic effort to describe how the universe functions through careful observation. Written thousands of years ago by someone who clearly devoted significant time to studying the sky. Grok's ability to compare this with known ancient astronomical systems made the analysis especially insightful. The dream visions, prophecy or historical record. Chapters 83 through 90 contain what are known as the dream visions. Enoch describes 2 visions he experienced. The first is a frightening vision of a flood destroying the earth. The second is a lengthy allegorical history of the world, often called the animal apocalypse, where all the major figures in biblical history are represented as animals. Adam and Eve appear as white bulls, the Israelites as sheep, and their oppressors as different predators. Grok's analysis of this section was especially fascinating because it applied something historians call vaticinium ex eventu, prophecy written after the fact. The AI highlighted that some parts of the animal apocalypse are so historically detailed regarding events in Israelite history that they appear to have been written with prior knowledge of those events. This is a mainstream scholarly observation, not a fringe theory, and it raises important questions about exactly when different sections of the book were written and by whom. But the vision doesn't end with recorded history. It continues into a description of future events, a final battle, the defeat of evil, and the transformation of the world into a place of lasting peace. Grok noted that this end-times vision shares unmistakable structural similarities with the Book of Revelation in the New Testament, including the sequence of a great tribulation followed by divine judgment and a renewed earth. The question this raises, which the AI presented objectively, is one that theologians and scholars have genuinely debated. Did the authors of Revelation draw from the Enochic tradition? The textual similarities are close enough that most scholars believe yes, the influence is genuine. Grok explained that case clearly and connected specific passages from both texts to demonstrate it. The Son of Man, the title Jesus used. This is where the AI analysis became genuinely remarkable for many people. Chapters 46 through 48 of the Book of Enoch describe a heavenly figure called the Son of Man, a being who existed before creation, who sits beside God on his throne, and who will judge the wicked and vindicate the righteous at the end of days. This is significant because Son of Man is the title Jesus uses for himself more than any other throughout the Gospels, around 80 times across Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In the Gospel of Mark especially, Jesus uses it in passages that closely mirror the Enochic Son of Man, a coming figure of cosmic authority and judgment. Grok's textual comparison highlighted that the specific characteristics given to the Son of Man in Verse Enoch, pre-existence, divine authority, the role of judge, and a connection with light and wisdom closely match the theological claims made about Jesus in the New Testament, so much that New Testament scholars have debated this relationship for decades. Some argue that Jesus intentionally used the Enochic title to show his audience exactly what kind of figure he claimed to be. Others believe the influence was more indirect and shaped by the surrounding culture. What the AI made clear is that this connection is neither new nor a fringe idea. It has been discussed in academic theology since the 19th century. But because the Book of Enoch is absent from most people's Bibles, the average churchgoer has rarely encountered this background. Running the text through Grok made that relationship visible and understandable for a much broader audience. Why was it excluded from the Bible? This is the question everyone asks, and Grok provided a balanced, multi-layered answer when prompted directly. The short version is this. The Book of Enoch wasn't removed from one Bible. It was never officially accepted into the Hebrew Bible or the later Protestant Old Testament in the first place. It was excluded during the process of canonization, which occurred at different times for different religious traditions. The rabbinical Jewish authorities who finalized the Hebrew Bible around the late 1st and early 2nd centuries decided not to include it. One possible reason is that its content, especially the Watcher's narrative and its detailed teachings about angels, was considered potentially controversial or unorthodox during a period when Jewish identity faced tremendous pressure after the destruction of the Second Temple. Religious leaders may have preferred to unite around texts that preserved clearer theological boundaries. For early Christianity, the councils that shaped the biblical canon, Nicaea in 325 C and Carthage in 397 C, examined many different writings. By the time of those councils, the Book of Enoch had already circulated for centuries and had clearly influenced Christian theology. But its vivid descriptions of fallen angels and its complex view of the cosmos may have made it difficult to fit comfortably within the theological framework the early church was establishing. Grok presented several scholarly perspectives on this and noted that no single, simple explanation exists. What the AI highlighted as especially interesting is that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which preserves the oldest continuous Christian tradition in the world, has kept the Book of Enoch within its canon from the beginning. They were never part of the Roman ecclesiastical process that shaped the Western biblical canon. So, whether the book was removed or simply never included depends entirely on which Christian tradition you are referring to. Dead Sea Scrolls confirm the book's antiquity. One piece of evidence that no serious researcher questions is the discovery of Book of Enoch fragments among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran in 1947. More than 20 Aramaic and Hebrew fragments from different sections of 1st Enoch were uncovered there, dating between 200 BC and 100 BC. This makes the Book of Enoch one of the best represented texts at Qumran. More copies were discovered there than of many canonical Old Testament books. Grok highlighted this when asked about the historical credibility of the text. The AI pointed out that the Dead Sea Scrolls evidence establishes beyond reasonable doubt that the Book of Enoch was widely known, widely copied, and regarded as an important religious text by at least one major Jewish community during the same period when Jesus and his contemporaries were living. This isn't speculation. It is archaeological evidence. The astronomical book sections discovered at Qumran are especially ancient, predating the final compiled form of 1st Enoch. This suggests that different parts of the text existed independently before being brought together into the version we know today, which is actually quite common for ancient religious literature. Grok's analysis approached the text using the same academic framework applied to other ancient documents, and the conclusion is straightforward. It is genuinely ancient, genuinely important, and genuinely worthy of serious study. What AI revealed about the theology of judgment. A large portion of the Book of Enoch focuses on divine judgment, the destiny of the wicked, the vindication of the righteous, and the final destruction of those who oppressed God's people. Grok's analysis of this theme produced some of the most detailed and thought-provoking insights in the entire experiment. The AI observed that the theology of judgment in 1st Enoch is more organized and comprehensive than anything found in the canonical Old Testament. There are descriptions of places where the spirits of the dead remain while awaiting judgment, with separate regions for the righteous and the wicked, each experiencing different conditions according to how they lived and died. This represents one of the clearest early examples of a fully developed afterlife theology within the Jewish tradition. And it closely parallels ideas that later appear throughout the New Testament. Grok also highlighted the Epistle of Enoch in chapters 91 through 108, which contains what is known as the Apocalypse of Weeks, a symbolic history of the world divided into 10 ages. This section announces specific judgments against the wealthy and powerful who exploit the poor in language that is remarkably bold and socially compelling. Several New Testament scholars have compared its tone to the letter of James in the Bible and to the warnings Jesus delivered during the Sermon on the Mount. The overall picture that Grok presented of the Book of Enoch's theology is of a text that treated the moral seriousness of divine justice with great importance, one that was deeply concerned with the suffering of the innocent and the accountability of the powerful. That message, the AI observed, runs consistently throughout every section of the book, regardless of its authorship or date. The similarities to other ancient mythologies. One of the most thought-provoking insights from running the Book of Enoch through Grok was its comparative analysis with other ancient mythological traditions. The AI identified similar narrative structures in texts from cultures that, according to mainstream history, had no direct contact with ancient Israel. The flood narrative that Enoch prophesies clearly connects with the Sumerian story of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which predates the biblical flood account. But Grok went even further, identifying structural similarities between the descent of the Watchers and the Sumerian account of the Anunnaki, divine beings associated with the heavens who interact with humanity. It also recognized parallels with the Greek myth of the Titans teaching humanity forbidden knowledge before being imprisoned by Zeus. Now, and this is important, the AI made it clear that these parallels do not prove a shared historical event. What they suggest from a scholarly perspective is either cultural diffusion, where these stories spread between civilizations through contact and trade, or that different cultures independently develop narratives to explain the same underlying human experiences, the origin of evil, the dangers of forbidden knowledge, and the consequences of beings crossing boundaries they were never intended to cross. What Grok's analysis offered was a clear, well-organized map of these parallels that an everyday audience could genuinely understand. There was no need to compare a dozen mythology books just to see the connections presented in one place, what modern scholars actually say. It's important to be clear about what the academic consensus on the Book of Enoch actually looked like in 2024 and 2025, because this text is not as overlooked by scholars as popular media sometimes suggests. Grok's analysis, when asked about academic reception, drew from a substantial body of genuine scholarly research. Scholars like George W. E. Nicholsburg, who wrote the standard academic commentary on 1st Enoch for the Hermenia series, have spent their careers demonstrating the theological depth and historical importance of this text. Gabriele Boccaccini, at the University of Michigan, founded the Enoch Seminar, an international community of scholars devoted specifically to studying Enochic Judaism and its influence on early Christianity and Rabbinic Judaism. This represents serious, peer-reviewed academic research, not fringe scholarship. What Grok highlighted is that within academic biblical studies, the influence of the Enochic tradition on early Christianity is actually well recognized. The debate isn't whether that influence existed, it's about its extent and direction. Did early Christians adopt Enochic ideas about the Son of Man and angelology? Almost certainly, yes. Did the Book of Enoch influence how Jesus' followers understood his identity and mission? Many scholars believe it did. The gap between what academic researchers know about the Book of Enoch and what the average person sitting in a church pew knows is enormous. And that gap is exactly what makes AI-powered analysis of this text so fascinating to such a broad audience. Grok effectively opened access to a body of scholarship that had remained inside university libraries for decades. The questions that Grok couldn't answer. In the interest of fairness and accuracy, it's important to spend time on what Grok's analysis actually couldn't accomplish, because not everything people are claiming about this AI experiment is equally well supported. Grok is a language model. It recognizes patterns in text and builds connections based on its training data. It cannot verify historical claims, confirm supernatural events, or determine whether the events described in the Book of Enoch literally occurred. When some online commentators suggest that Grok proved the Book of Enoch is historically accurate or that AI confirmed the existence of the Nephilim, they are misrepresenting what the technology actually accomplished. What Grok can do is examine literary and theological patterns, make cross-textual comparisons, and present scholarly perspectives in a clear and organized way. What it cannot do is settle debates that historians, archaeologists, and theologians have discussed for centuries. The question of whether the Watchers were literal beings, symbolic figures, or purely mythological is not something any AI can resolve, and Grok itself, when prompted carefully, says exactly that. There's also the question of what can be lost through translation. The Book of Enoch was written in Aramaic and Hebrew and later preserved in Ge'ez. Every translation requires interpretive choices, and Grok was primarily analyzing English translations, especially versions such as R.H. Charles's 1917 translation and the later E. Isaac translation in the Old Testament pseudepigrapha. Different translations highlight different details, and the AI's analysis naturally reflects the choices made by those translators. This isn't a reason to reject the analysis, it's a reason to treat it as a starting point instead of a final conclusion. And to Grok's credit, when asked directly about its limitations, it acknowledges them openly. The Book of Enoch is a genuine, ancient, historically important text that was excluded from most Western Bibles, yet preserved by the Ethiopian Church and confirmed as authentically ancient through the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. When analyzed with Grok AI, the patterns it highlighted, connections to biblical theology, the Son of Man title, the Watcher's narrative, the roster of fallen angels, and the astronomical precision are all subjects that serious scholars have explored for decades. The AI didn't uncover anything supernatural, but it made something genuinely important far more understandable and accessible to everyday readers. And that may be more significant than any single discovery. If the Book of Enoch was widely known to Jesus and his disciples, why do you think it never became part of the Bible that most of us grew up reading? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Secret Narrative as we uncover hidden mysteries, explore untold stories from history, and dive into the fascinating world of new discoveries. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Nature Mystery Unravel Mysteries, learn untold tales of history, and stay in the exciting world of new discoveries.